Hello and welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm host Alex Kenlin, where we try to make sense out of contemporary issues and otherwise come to terms with them. And I have joining me today a friend and colleague, Dylan Price, fellow newsroom reporter. Hi, Dylan. How are you?
I'm doing great, Alex. It is a pleasure to be on here with you and excited to chat. This will be fun.
Well, and I'm excited with what we're going to chat about. You did a story on Arkansas PBS. And would you explain what's going on there?
Absolutely. So Arkansas PBS is now Arkansas TV as of a couple months ago, and so Carlton Wing, moving from his political career now into kind of running the entire operation, running the entire operation over there at Arkansas TV, overseeing this rebrand, and then with all that was going on in the national scale with public broadcasting, Arkansas became the first state to say that they're going to end their relationship with PBS effective this summer, and so through all of that, Arkansas PBS now became Arkansas TV, dropping that PBS branding, also dropping PBS programming. And so in turn, there's certainly been a lot of discourse here within the state and even beyond about whether or not this is the right decision, whether or not this is a political decision, and really where Arkansas TV goes from here, and if there is any way, shape, or form to keep PBS on Arkansas TV airwaves. And so that was really kind of the crux of this issue, is a group now starting up to try to keep Arkansas having PBS programming, and funny enough, the name Friends of Arkansas PBS, and it's led by two pretty big figures, and they're leading the charge, two former first ladies, and so far seems like they're at least making some progress towards having some discourse. And so we covered an event that they held, and then of course sat down with Carlton Wing to talk about the latest situation there with Arkansas TV.
And I was going to start with this conversation with Carlton Wing. Let me, if I've hit all the right buttons, we're about to see it and what you and him had to talk about. So let's watch this.
PBS programming, a casualty of funding, according to the rebranded Arkansas TV.
Had we stayed on the same course,
and that's
the
Carlton,
way
of
things
course,
we were going to be bankrupt as an agency in 2 years.
CEO Carlton Wing explained that federal cuts made it unfeasible.
So there was an immediate scramble on what do we do, how do we get through this fiscal year, and what does the future look like?
He says it's not a political issue, rather a fiscal one.
It's either red or it's blue, but the colors that are really there, it's black or it's red. We either operate in the black profitably or we operate in the red in debt.
Friends of Arkansas.
And I'm going to stop it there just so you and I can get back to our conversation. So, I mean, there we're at. There's not all the money in the world. And what was it that, did he get into it with you? What caused this loss of funding? Because, of course, Arkansas PBS ran for however many years.
The federal funding used to allow them to afford to keep PBS programming on. And so when that was slashed on the national level, it made it so that Arkansas TV couldn't afford the PBS product. And that was really what he said has been the whole basis of this whole thing. As you heard him say, it's not red or blue, it's red or black. They will not be able to afford it. And so he said that about 51% of their programming was PBS programming. So now, whether it's in-house, whether it's other public broadcast programming, that's what they have to backfill with it because it's cheaper and you have their whole studios. So they want to create more content out of their studios because that's more economically sound. And they think that's ultimately what it came down to. He said that once the funding got slashed on the federal level, they just simply couldn't afford PBS programming anymore.
And what do we lose with that PBS programming?
So you lose your typical PBS shows, but really where a lot of Arkansas or Friends of Arkansas PBS is fighting, and this was the event they held, is you lose all PBS Kids programming. And that's what they were really battling about, was you lose your Sesame Streets of the world, your all these shows that people grew up on, from Caillou to Curious George to Sid the Science Kid, and that's really the PBS Kids angle of it.
I take it you've watched a lot of PBS in your
I think
time.
a lot of people grew up on it. But
so you know I didn't, but so you'll have. That's why you have to walk me through these things. Yeah.
So you have the typical PBS programs that'll now be slashed with it, which a lot of people that didn't grow up on PBS Kids know a lot more of the PBS programming. But with the PBS Kids angle, I think that's really what Friends of Arkansas PBS wanted to hammer home with this event, is look how many kids like myself, so many other people grew up on those programs that aren't going to be accessible here in Arkansas anymore, at least on television. You can still access them on the app, which is something that Carlton mentioned during our sit-down, and you could still access it for free. You just won't be able to turn your TV on Arkansas TV and catch PBS Kids programming, but also PBS programming as a whole. I'm not as in line with PBS programming to tell you what you're going to lose on that, but pretty much anything with the PBS logo on it, you won't have come the end of June.
And you say it's proof that I should be better prepared, but I know some of the PBS adult programming, those history pieces.
Yes, Ken Burns. That was the big thing I was blanking on that as well.
Yeah. Oh, good.
A lot of those
feel so bad,
documentaries that they were talking about, you're going to lose that stuff as well. And again, just like PBS Kids programming, it's accessible. You can find it on the web. You can find it on the app. But you just won't be able to turn your TV on anymore and listen to Ken Burns, illustrate some of the history and all the other stuff, though, that people have come to know with PBS.
Sure. Now, with that said, wasn't it a unique pairing of these two? And this is what you and I bumped into each other in the parking garage of all places, and got to talking about this because the unique pairing of these two former first ladies.
It's Gay White and Barbara Pryor. So it's two opposite sides of the aisle, both their husbands serving as governor of the state. And it's red, it's blue. And to kind of illustrate Carlton's point, they're trying to hammer that home as well, that this isn't a partisan issue, this is a public TV issue. And that was really something that they said to me in our conversation, and something that Friends of Arkansas PBS as a whole has been trying to say, is that we don't want this to be partisan. We just want to keep this programming on our airwaves.
Now, and I'm walking very carefully here, but wasn't that part of the argument behind cutting funds for public television, that it leaned to a particular political discipline and away from an opposite political discipline?
It was, and I think on the national scale, that was certainly the main topic. And I think when Carlton and I had our sit down, I can only go off of what he said and what Friends of Arkansas PBS said.
Sure.
But Carlton said that wasn't, at least on his end of things. He said, on the national level, yes, it has been made partisan, and that may be why funding was cut. But from an Arkansas level specifically, and that was what he really wanted to hammer home, that it was not political, that they just simply couldn't afford it. If that is the reason federal funding was cut, he said, yes, I could totally see a lane in which that was political and was partisan. But he simply can only speak for Arkansas. And that was really the message he wanted to send, was that maybe on the national level they thought it had some political narrative one way or the other, PBS programming, but in Arkansas it was fiscal.
All right. Well, with that said, let's continue. I'll tell you what, I think we have some footage of the First Ladies here, and I'm going to put that on if my buttonology is up to speed. And let's see, was this part of your interview with them?
Ladies, Gay White and Barbara Pryor, trying to help raise awareness and funds.
We hope that it's a grassroots movement and that we can save PBS Arkansas.
They say it's not partisan, it's a service.
They don't ask you who you voted for. It's for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Many seeing the biggest loss in PBS Kids.
People grew up on PBS, my
Your
children,
point, yeah.
Gay's children, all of our children.
Including, well, kids themselves.
I used to watch it as a kid, and I think that it needs to be here and stay.
Messages received by the company sharing that sentiment.
I learned how to read from PBS Kids. I'm going to be a pediatric nurse because I was inspired by your programs.
Let me pause it right here, just to say, well, okay, there's a case to be made why PBS is important, and we should have access to it on television. But how are they going to fund this baby?
And that was something that the Friends of Arkansas PBS, through this event, I think the hope is, and I mentioned the word grassroots movement, they hope that people see that this is so important and either A, advocate for it and try to reach out to lawmakers or reach out to the Public Television Commission to try to find some alternative solution from a budgetary standpoint on the government side of things, but also something that they said in our conversation, in our interview, that wasn't in the story but was mentioned is, if they can raise enough money, and Carlton mentioned that too, if there was a way for them to raise enough money to keep PBS programming on, then sir, he said we can have those dialogues and have those conversations, and there is going to be a conversation, a meeting coming up very soon where they have that, and I think that's an angle of it that Carlton said is potentially feasible. It's not a guarantee that if they raise the funds that higher-ups above him will allow it to happen, but it is a scenario in which, outside of just getting some kind of change in the legislative side of things, if there was a grassroots movement, if every dollar counted, if people sent money in, there is an angle to keep PBS programming on that way.
Now, with that said, how much money are we talking about? Do you know? Were they able to provide you a figure?
I wasn't able to get a clear-cut figure. From what, and this was really interesting, is you saw their PBS Kids executive was able to speak with us and talk about the importance of their programming and her angle of it. But I asked both of them. I asked Carlton and I asked her, have there been dialogue about maybe finding a way to reduce rates? So PBS told me that they are offering reduced rates to states that are willing to keep the programming on, trying to find ways to maybe pay it down the line, trying to be fluid with it. Now, Carlton told me that they actually raised rates. I haven't been able to cross-reference that on either end of things, and I think it's
PBS
one of those.
raised rates.
Yes, I think it's one of those he said, she said's of it, where there's two different perspectives on it, and he says they've raised rates, they haven't been willing to budge on their rates. PBS says they've been able to do it for other states and other areas. Why can't they do it? They have had discourse. They plan on having discourse this week. Maybe that's something that's changed since the last time the Arkansas TV side spoke with the PBS side. But there was a clear disconnect there on what the rates were going to be, and if there was a way to temper those down a little bit to at least keep programming on through the end of the year. Because as of now, it'll be gone in the summer. So I wasn't able to get a clear-cut figure. And I believe it's kind of one of those, Carlton said, maybe we could find a route where it's, if we can just keep the programming we want on, like your Ken Burns documentaries, say your Sesame Streets, and that's really all we want. Kind of he said, a la carte style, where we're not just getting everything, we're just getting a couple things that we want. He said that's something they'd be open to. It doesn't seem like that was something that has been brought to the table from either side yet, just something they were open to.
But I want to make sure I understand. So PBS raised its rates.
According to Arkansas TV.
Okay.
PBS says they've been willing to cut rates and are flexible. So that was really where there was the discourse on that. It didn't seem like, or disconnect rather, on that of whether it hadn't been communicated with Arkansas TV or whether that wasn't true. Whatever it may be, I wasn't able to get a clear answer from either side on that of whether or not rates have been raised or whether or not they've been lowered by PBS with all the federal funding cuts.
Mm-hmm. Because it seems only fair. Well, first of all, we'll assume they were, that's exactly the case. But, of course, the price of everything's going up. And the big thing I heard, though, when you were talking about, they'll work on raising money, and that's good. But affordability, man, and I don't have to tell you, the price of ground beef's going up. I think gasoline's going up 55 cents this month, 55 cents a gallon in Arkansas. So there's just not as much money as there has been.
And I think that was a case that was made, too. And it costs money on PBS's end to produce this programming, whether it is your documentary, your info-style stuff, or animation. Animation costs money. It costs a good amount of money. And so when it comes to that end of it, they still need to turn a profit. They're a business as well. Even though they're a public service, they're a business. They need to keep their people employed.
Sure.
They need to keep money up on their end of things, too. So it really is a disconnect on that end, too, of, if they need to raise their rates, it just comes at a poor time is kind of what it seems like with federal funding cuts.
Well, and I'm going to pause here for a moment because we have to make time for our sponsors. We really like our sponsors. So this is Make It Make Sense. I'm Alex Kenlin here with Dylan Price talking about the battle for Arkansas PBS and what's ahead of them. And we'll be right back. Because, of course, Dylan, as we get back to it here, and welcome back to Make It Make Sense with Alex Kenlin and guest Dylan Price as we talk about Arkansas PBS. I have to make a joke because that's my nature.
Okay.
I'm sorry, our machine just blinked for a minute, and I'm a little concerned we might have broken something. So, they have to make a living making these programs. Mm-hmm. I don't know what journalism was like for you, but in my case, do it for the exposure. How many times did I hear? How many free articles have I turned in my time doing it for the exposure? And the one thing that happened with that exposure, I never got any job offers. They just said thank you, and I went on my way. Now, is it you being in broadcast? Did you ever have to deal with that?
I think absolutely. I think it's something.
Oh, really?
I think there's many examples I can come up with where, especially as a student at Penn State, they gave us opportunities to do play-by-play broadcasting and all of that for them, but it was a student U for a reason. They didn't have to pay us, and in turn, they did it for us for exposure, which it works great for play-by-play opportunities, but it also means you're not getting any money out of it. But it is exposure and an opportunity to call the product, so it's kind of a trade in that sense. But that would be the experience I've had with it, where they give you the opportunity.
Well, there you have it. Of course, college is a whole different thing. Now,
Yes, absolutely.
Well, actually, they paid me a tiny bit for writing for the school paper.
They did pay us for student radio.
Okay, well, that's not so bad.
No, not at all. It was more so the Big Ten Network has a streaming service called Big Ten Plus.
Okay.
And you can pay for Big Ten Plus but the talent is all student broadcasters.
And we're all for streaming services, aren't
Yes.
we? Aren't we?
Yes.
So, yeah, we're getting a little bit off here. But,
So PBS.
yeah, so PBS. Well, wait a minute. I want to hear about Penn State. So is this your first time in Arkansas?
This is my first time in Arkansas.
How long have you been in Arkansas?
4.5 months now, I believe.
Okay, that's good because you haven't been here for the summer yet.
I have not. I've been warned.
Yes, yes. There are, just to give you an idea, and we'll get back to PBS. Just to give you an idea, there are companies that mandate wearing a tie, and from July to Labor Day, they suspend that rule because it gets that hot. So, apropos of nothing, but how do you find Arkansas, sir?
Arkansas is really, really great. One, I was not missing the snow at all until we got a little taste of it here, but was not missing the snow. It is really nice to brag to my friends and family back home that it's 70s here, and it's just kissing 40 there if they're lucky.
Right.
So that, and then I think it's true what they say. Everything in the north moves a little quicker, but people are a little more brash, and down south, everybody could not be more friendly. And I say that often, and it sounds cliche, but it has been the experience so far.
And my final deviation on this point, you said the South, and of course you're correct. Geographically, I always refer to this area, and to be clear, I'm from Philadelphia myself. I'm a Philly kid. But I've always referred to this area as homesteader culture. And I think there's a lot of willingness for neighbors to help neighbors, even when they would otherwise not get along, just because there's people that can walk out their backyard and show you the foundation where their grandparents built a cabin. So
I do think that's even earlier today, working on a story for this evening, and it's about North Little Rock in the Conference Center. We got an exclusive look at it.
Oh, good.
And it's so interesting to me to hear how deep the roots are for a lot of the people in politics here, but also public service here in the cities. And it's very interesting to see how willing they are to lay the hand out, but two, it's because they're so proud of their culture down here.
Sure.
And yeah, it's been really fascinating to see versus growing up about 90 miles or so from New York City.
Yeah.
Things move a little crazier down there, up there.
So where in Pennsylvania was it?
Well, I'm from New York.
Oh, okay.
Went to school at Penn State, but I'm from Monticello, New York, so where Woodstock 69 was, about 10 minutes from there.
Sure. Well, I've got just so you know, my sister and her longtime husband live in Mount Kisco.
Okay.
So, and I talked to them last night, and they're doing well, by the way. But with that said, as we talk about the culture, as we talk about extending a hand to others, and that's what we're talking about with this PBS thing. Now, you made a point here, and I'd like to riff on that for a moment, if you will, to add that you said they can still get it on the app.
They can.
So, and our real interest here is what the children have access to. I mean, we adults, and I guess on the app means we could also get it on a web browser.
I believe so.
So for me, web browser, I probably watch more on web browsers than I do on television anymore. And when I go and visit my grandchildren, and the youngest one's 4, they look at tablets. They really don't look at television a lot. And then as we were talking about streaming services, of course, we're seeing a shift. So I wonder how serious a loss this really is going to be.
The one point that I found really fascinating and you always wish you have more time to slide all this stuff into the story.
Right.
It makes it great for this format, though.
Exactly, which is why we're here.
The PBS Kids executive mentioned that in some of the mail she gets from families that are sad about the loss and the potential loss, not just in Arkansas, but in other places where it's looking like it could be that route as well, she said that one of the big things they've tried to hammer home is that not everybody always has access to great Wi-Fi. Not everybody always has access to broadband, whatever it may be. Most people have access to find your public channels on television. If you can get to television, there's a good opportunity to potentially find that on Arkansas TV, once was Arkansas PBS. And so that was something that she mentioned, is that for some people, that's the easiest way to find it right now, and that's going to be gone. And now if they don't have access to a tablet, a computer at home, for children particularly in that educational programming, you don't have that access anymore. Maybe you do at the classroom, maybe you do at school, but when you go home, that's not going to be there.
Yeah, what your story reminded me is during COVID, how many of these kids were trying to school from home. And I know you weren't in the state at the time, but I was up in I was in Clinton, Arkansas. They were having a heck of a time. They were having to run, hotspots out to different distant communities.
It was an issue in New York too. I mean, so I'm 90 miles from it, but
I was
those who
gonna
know
say,
Woodstock, it's small town New York, Monticello, New York.
Yeah.
it was an issue there too. We would get emails. I was still finishing out high school at the time, and there was a lot of messaging from our schools and from schools in the area of, if we can help you out in any way, shape, or form with Wi-Fi, with that access, whatever it may be, trying to make that work because, well, I know down here things got back to normal a little bit quicker. In New York, my entirety of my senior year of high school was pretty much online or hybrid.
Oh, really?
And so that was felt not necessarily as much by us because at that point you're doing some college classes, doing whatever else.
Right.
But that's felt in the young grade levels, and that's where they really hammered home the point of it's kind of COVID-esque where they're going to have that blackout now of you're not going to be able to have that programming because some people don't have access to the Wi-Fi, the tablets, whatever it may be. And so that was something that they actually did bring up COVID as a kind of an example of when we didn't have that access, PBS Kids was there. Now you're not going to have that access to PBS Kids as easily accessible as it once was.
Well, and let's make this point. Since then, there's been a tremendous drive nationally to get broadband out there
Yes.
to the communities, and again, rural Arkansas being one of those beneficiaries. And regardless of your politics, I think that's something America's doing right now. Is getting as many people online as they can.
Even in Sullivan County, New York, right before I was heading out here, one of the last stories I covered was wide access broadband in Sullivan County. And so it's helpful, but it was the example she used. So it's funny that you brought up COVID because that was something that they brought up as well.
Well, good deal. Well, gosh, where do we go with this PBS thing from here? It sounds like it's a battle not yet, only just now getting started. Let's put it that way.
I think there's two sides of that coin, Alex. I think you could say that it's a battle that's is just getting started, and also on Arkansas TV's side, it's a battle that they've already moved on from in some ways. They've released recently their list of programming that they want to start rolling out.
Sure.
In our interview, in our sit-down, Carlton mentioned a couple educational programming. One was a Taste of Arkansas Kitchen, where they try to teach nutritional education to adults, to kids here in Arkansas. He mentioned to me that they want to start airing more sports, more high school sports, more local college sports, whatever it may be. They want to expand their programming. They have other deals with public service. So in a lot of ways, they've already moved on. So in some ways, it feels like for Friends of Arkansas PBS and for the former First Ladies, this battle's just starting to rage up as we get closer to the summer. For Arkansas TV, it wasn't just dropping PBS from their name. They've almost fully moved on.
Well, and I suppose I'm really working hard to avoid politics in this conversation. I kind of pride myself on keeping politics out of the conversation, if at all possible. And when I say politics, I'm not talking about policy. As you know, I talk about policy a lot, but and I talk about programs and systems a lot. But in this case, Arkansas PBS has its heart, Arkansas TV has its heart in the right place. They're filled with good intent. Certainly, Carlton Wing knows how the state works. He served as a state representative prior to assuming this position. So it'd be wrong for us if anybody walks away from this show and somehow we vilified Arkansas TV, then we've done something wrong. And would you agree with that?
His background's in television. His
Well,
background before being a representative actually was with the KARK umbrella as a sports director, and him and I talked about his extensive experience prior to getting into politics in television. So for him, he said, I wanted to just go off and fish. Either way, I wasn't planning on continuing politics. I wanted to go off and fish, and we had about a 25-minute sit-down on camera, but off camera had some really good conversations about his background and his drive to do this. He said he didn't need to, didn't necessarily have to. He did this because he wanted to. He called it, to me, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity because he feels like he gets to have that extra reach into homes right here in Arkansas by creating programming tailored to Arkansans. And that was really the message he wanted to share and said to me was that this is about Arkansans. If this is the route we have to take, because it's not red or blue, it's red or black, if we can't make a profit by keeping PBS out here and keep public television on the airwaves, then we're going to tailor it out of our studios here and find more Arkansas-based programming, shining a bigger spotlight on local. That was part of it. And then the other thing he said was, say we do add PBS back. Public television could die in Arkansas. And that was something that it was gruesome, but it was one of the final lines and very blunt that he said was, maybe we can find a route forward. And if that is possible, one of the last things in the story is him saying it's not over yet. It ain't over till it's over. There's still an opportunity here. But if there is not a way to make it economically feasible and they just do it to keep PBS programming on, he said then you don't just talk about possibly losing PBS programming here in Arkansas. You could lose public television as a whole here in Arkansas.
Right.
So to your point, if anybody walks away feeling like it was vilified, that was not.
Well,
It isn't the intent, because he said they're just fighting to keep essentially fighting to keep the lights on.
Well, and let me be completely clear. I certainly don't think you did anything to vilify anybody in this story. I thought you were very even-handed. But of course, we all, you and I both, as everybody else in the rest of the room, try to keep things even-handed.
Absolutely.
But,
It's the name of the game. It's the job.
Also, to that point, I'd actually forgotten until you brought it up. But yeah, Carlton has a strong background in television, and he's a good man. And by the way, I kind of like that idea of nutrition education. This is something that's really getting to be a problem in the state.
And I think that was something that was what led him to take this role and this opportunity, was to create programming tailored to the needs of Arkansans, too. Not just to shine a light on local, to tailor it to the needs of Arkansans. And maybe that is what ties into the federal dialogue of, whether or not there was any lean either way politically with the programming on PBS. But now they can tailor that all in-house. And whether that leads either type of way as more gets rolled out, that remains to be seen. But they can tailor it to what they believe the needs of Arkansans are. And one of the biggest things he wanted to hammer home was that nutrition through this Taste of Arkansas kitchen that they're going to roll out soon. Yeah,
and I think, there's a lot of other needs. As we know, I'd hope they're looking at something along the lines of maternal health or infant health or that sort of thing, because as we know, that's a huge issue in the state.
And if you can address those weak points through the public television, that was what he said is been driving him to do this, because if you can find those flashpoints, those big issues right here in Arkansas, then it's different than just this national public broadcasting that's tailored to a general message. Now it's hammered home and zoned in and zeroed in on Arkansans.
Well, with that said, it's quitting time here at the old Make It Make Sense compound. But Dylan, thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. Well, I look forward to doing it. I know you're working on a lot of stories. I know you and I have actually talked about some other stuff going on that we've got to sit down with, but and I'm sure we'll find time to do it.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
So thank you. I'm going to take over the screen here and say thank you. This has been Make It Make Sense. I'm Alex Kenlin. You have any questions, considerations, tips, etc., make it make sense at nextstar.tv. Alex Kenlin here with Dylan Price. Talk soon.